Well, everyone, welcome. My name is Eva DeGostini, and I'm going to be I'm with going to be presenting the material tonight, the theory. And Sarah, why don't you present yourself, and also Lynn?
Yes, Sarah Cleary and Tishnagashин, Mashtu I'm working at FNEC as a language and culture advisor. Also, I'm an artist and I'm a super player. I like to play and performing. And we have the honor this week again to have a special guest. It's Lynn Jacob. Lynn's been working in so many areas with the children in her school in Gallery School. So Lynn, if you have want to say a little bit about you.
Okay, Sego Sawagwegu. Obviously, the ones that are attendant from Ganawage know who I am. I've been working at Cattery School all of my educational career. Started in 1989, and I'm still there. Different capacities. Started with a classroom teacher, then went into a special ed teacher. Went into from there was associate principal at Cattery School in Ganawage. And then for the past 17 years now, I've been working as a student support teacher in a room that we call the Skunagoa room, which means big peace. I've presented a few times for FNEC for the symposium. I think once I was up in Kirikanzibi, and then I presented again for the FNEC parent symposium at Mount Saint Sever. So, about the room and the work that I do with the room, being a student support teacher. I've also, during that time, certified myself as a yoga kids teacher. So, I still do that as part of the support services for children. It's so important, when children are dealing with, different issues in their lives, mainly anxiety, and some of the past maybe traumas in their life or the intergenerational traumas, just teaching them how to calm and relax and connect and root them. I bring in a lot of our cultural ways when I'm working with the students in that capacity. And then the other part of the job is in our school, instead of sending children to say the office or the principal, they get sent to me, and then we go through problem solving, relaxation, some anger management. I mean, it all depends on what the issue is. So that's the work that I do right now. And I'm been invited to be a part of this panel on child development because I guess of the expertise that I've had in the past 30 years. So, and also looking at our cultural and our spiritual perspective in child development. So that's my role there, and I look forward to the topic today.
Great, Valerie. You want to just let people know a little bit about who you are, just in case there are some new people here who don't know everyone?
Yeah, so I'm Valérie Fortin, working at the FNEC as a spec ed counselor. So, c'est ça.
She's been the one who has spearheaded this program with us. So and just for those of you that don't know me, I have worked in schools for many, many years. If I mention how many years, it's a long time, but I have had the opportunity to work in some northern communities, First Nations communities in the early part of my career, and have some sense of the challenges that your children face, but also the wonderful strengths that the families bring for the children and that you bring to the children in your schools. So this set of workshops that we're giving, this training that we're giving, is really meant to bring all the adults who work with children back to the basics of what it is that our young children, especially our 4 to 8-year-olds, need. And so I'm going to share my screen right now because we're going to look at the topic today is the importance of emotional expression and play. And I thank the whole FNEC team, along with Sarah, for the beautiful, beautiful pictures that we were able to use. That just represents so much of what it is that we're going to talk about today. And of course, just to let you know a little bit about how it's going to work out. So you've had a chance to meet our special guest. We are going to, because we're doing theory today, we're on Zoom webinar, but next week, we're at from 3:30 to 4:30, we will have a time to share where we're going to use regular Zoom and we'll be able to see all of you. We are recording this session. And it is recording, right? Oh yes, there it is. It's recording. Good. And it will be up on YouTube, the playlist there. So if there's someone that you know that would like to see this, they're welcome to see it. If you want to watch it again, you're welcome to do that, and share it with whoever you think this message would be helpful to. So today we're going to do about an hour of a background theory and understanding. Then we're going to have some time for questions and answer, and then we're going to want to have some of your feedback. And then we have a small little task that we want you to do. Just for the next week, just to focus you on, and that the idea of this program is that we do a week of theory, then you have a week to go back and be with your children, think about some of the things that were said, and just see how this applies to you and the work that you do. And then you can come back to us and ask us questions, and we can help you to deal with the day-to-day work that you do with children. And then we do have a written survey at the very end. So, oops, hang on here. There we go. So play. Why is play important? And we all know that children need to play, and we're happy when they play. But I think we've kind of lost a little bit of our deep knowledge about it. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you today is how play actually helps the brain to grow, and also how it promotes our emotional well-being. And especially in this time right now that we're living in, this time of pandemic, really, really important that we understand, because there's, we know that we're all in a little bit of a distress and alarm. And is there something we can do to help our children? And absolutely we can. And play also helps create strong attachments. So I think it's really important that we realize that sometimes when all else fails, maybe we need to use the play to get children back into the right relationship with us. And we all of us want our children, every one of us wants our children to grow into the most wonderful beings. We want them to be problem solvers. We want them to be creative. We want them to be curious. We also want them to be cooperative, get along. We want them to be lifelong learners. We want them to be competent, skillful. These are all things that we want them to be able to do and to work in our society. So to be able to have the skills, the reading, the writing, the mathematics, the multiple languages, that allow them to be able to be true contributors to a society in the healthiest way possible. And so if you remember back to last week, those of you that were able to attend last time, not last week, but last time, if we just have to remember that human beings are very much like a plant. They're like the tomato plant. Produces spiky yellow flowers that eventually turn into this beautiful ripe red fruit. Takes a long time, but it comes and it happens. And we know that in order for that to happen, it's because the brain is growing and developing, but it only grows when it's guided by a caring adult. And of course, that is so much our role. And a caring adult, of course, also knows what children need to know to be able to work well in a society. The thing we need to remember, and one of the big questions that neuroscientists started asking, when especially when they could start to look at the functioning human brain, oh, how long does it take to grow a well-functioning human brain? And people thought maybe 18 or 19, but now we know it's at least 25 years. At least 25 years. And that's if all goes well. Unfortunately, if there's been stress or trauma or difficult things that children have faced, and many children do have it, it's going to take longer, but it doesn't mean it doesn't going to happen. And that's an important message. So one of the things we want to figure out is, well, okay, so how we're going to help our children to become good problem solvers? And again, we've talked about this process called the integrative process, where we've got this ability to have conflicting elements on the one hand, on the other hand. and problem solving is one of the things that it's part of our curriculum. In most education programs, they want children to be good problem solvers. But actually, and this is something that I have learned, I think probably in the last 4 to 5 years, it has become so clear to me that again, there's parts of the brain that have to work together for problem solving to happen. It isn't just because we teach it, it's actually because it's growing. And some of you are going to go, oh, I didn't come here to learn neuroscience. I came here to learn about children. But let's face it, our brains are there. And I often find that when people realize what's going on inside of the brain, maybe they have a little more patience. So the prefrontal cortex, the corpus callosum, and the two hemispheres of the brain. Well, what are these parts? Well, the prefrontal cortex is kind of this front part of our brain. It's kind of the gray matter, and it's the part that allows us really to have two thoughts at a time. But it doesn't start kicking in until about 5 years of age. And again, they do this through the imaging. They can kind of make a picture of a child's brain. And at 5 years old, the frontal cortex starts lighting up when the child has a problem to solve that doesn't really start lighting up in the early years. So these two thoughts, you have, oh my goodness, on the one hand, and sometimes we talk about sharing. I want to keep the truck for myself, but I should share it with my friend. And that prefrontal cortex allows you to have those both thoughts at the same time. Then we have this little bridge in our brain that connects the left part of our brain and the right part of our brain. And again, it's like there's many parts, even the prefrontal cortex has a right part and a left part, and all different parts of our brain do. But this left and right hemisphere, they do two very different things. And this is something I just learned probably about 2.5 or 3 years ago. And when I learned it, I realized, oh my goodness, there was so much I didn't understand about children and child development. And so when I understood this, it made me again respect the long time that it takes for a brain to grow. So this is what very very uh, the person wasn't a researcher. What he did was he looked at all of the information about how the brain develops, and especially the right and left hemisphere. And he looked at what everybody had said about it and what all the new research said. And what we're starting to understand is the two parts of our brain have two very different jobs, and they're both very, very important. So the left hemisphere, and some of you might know this because maybe you've done those little tests, am I right-brained or left-brained? Well, left hemisphere we know is very logical. It learns the facts. It has one fact after another, after another, after another. So it's not in the big picture, but it's one after another. So all the bits and pieces. It focuses on details and on rules, and it wants the answer. And again, I can take the example of reading because many of you are teachers and you know that reading requires that children know that there are letters, that letters make up words, that words make up sentences. And it's hard for a child to read sometimes if they don't know how to sound out a word. And so we teach reading by bits and pieces. And of course, those bits and pieces are important. But many of you, especially of you that have worked with older children, know that there are some children that actually can read sentences, but they don't understand what they're reading. And that's where the right hemisphere comes in. The right hemisphere is able to take the whole picture. It makes sense of the details. So if especially in English, sometimes the READ could be read or read. Well, which one is it? Well, it depends on which sentence it's in. you know, it continues considers the context and it seeks understanding. How can I make sense of this? Both my husband and my daughter have a very hard time sounding out words, but they're excellent readers because when they see the whole sentence, they know that, oh, that's what that word is supposed to be. So our right hemisphere is actually more important than our left hemisphere. But in a well-developed person, both of the parts have to grow. But this is the piece that really struck me, and oh my goodness, was that the right hemisphere requires experiences, not information to develop. The left hemisphere likes the information, but the right hemisphere, the part of our brain that understands things, needs to be able to do things. And one of the other things we now know is that the right hemisphere is in rapid development during the preschool years. So from 0 to 8 years old or 7 years old, from 4 to 7 years old, the right hemisphere is growing and developing and making sense of the world that we live in. And that is why children need lots and lots of play. Because if you know how to read words, but you don't understand what those words mean, you're not going to become a good reader. So what we have to do here is understand that it's the playful activity that actually makes a positive difference in brain development, especially in the earlier year. It builds that brain that can then help these children to problem solve. And the most impressive brain growth happens when play is in the context of a warm human connection. So the other thing we need to understand is that play, there's been a real erosion of play in our world. Most of us haven't noticed it, um, but it's happening more and more. Um, David Elkind, because a lot of researchers now are studying play, which is very interesting. Over the past 2 decades, children have lost 12 hours of free time a week, including 8 hours of unstructured play and outdoor activities. Maybe in your communities, your children are fortunate to be able to have that. Maybe, those of you that live in cities, it's very tempting to bring your children to swimming lessons and to dance lessons and to this and that, which are very good things, but they can't interfere with that free play that children need. There's even an encyclopedia of play science, and Stuart Brown has said that the outdoor play has decreased by 71% in one generation in both the United States and the United Kingdom. Now, one of the things we need to realize is that along with this loss of play, we've also had a huge increase in childhood depression, childhood anxiety, ADHD, and it's parallel to the loss of play, but people aren't noticing it. And that was one of the reasons that when we introduced the 4-year-old kindergarten, I was happy that our children were coming into safe places with people that were well educated, but I was really worried if they were going to lose playtime. And of course, I know that in some of your communities, you have, your forest schools and other things. And this is very, very important because if we don't realize how important play is, inadvertently, things can get worse for children. That prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that that makes us pay attention. It's so interesting because again, we had these wonderful pictures to choose from. Look at these children. Look at them. They're so engrossed in what they're looking at, right? And what they found was self-regulation was better in those children who were allowed to play without interruption, right? And when they were engaged in play, they were focused, they tuned out. Who knows what those people behind them are doing? These little kids are ignoring what's happening behind them because they're engrossed in something. And by the way, play isn't just about, having fun. Play is about whatever engages you that isn't something you have to do. It's something you want to do. They look, they reflect, they listen. These 3 boys, there's something going on there. They're trying to figure something out and they're doing it together. And even things like play fighting can help children with figuring out how far they can go. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So and they've done studies on the brain of children who play more, the prefrontal cortex is more developed. And the other thing is that the more earlier you push reading, you don't actually get better readers. In the United Kingdom, they have some of the lowest skills, even though they have preschoolers in literacy programs, and I think they're starting to change that now. And if you put too much pressure on children to have to produce things to meet certain criteria, even to do tests, if you can imagine, which they do in the United States, these kids had more test anxiety and less creativity, and they didn't like school anymore. So we have to be so careful. We know what we want them to do, but we can't put that pressure on them. So we want to grow a good brain. We want all these parts of the brain to work together. It's actually play, especially in the early years, that's going to do it in the context of a warm human connection. Now, what is play? Well, play is characterized by a sense of freedom and enjoyment. Look at those kids out there. My goodness, look at them. The way they go, whatever's in their head, they're going to try and do. But it also is about moving or operating freely in a bounded space. And Sarah, I hope you don't mind here, but uh, can you just tell us what this rule is in the forest kindergarten?
Yes, it's from Joyce and Brenda Germain in Lesigush. And the one and only rule, and they repeat it every time they go outside, it's I need to see you all the time and you need to see me. So after that, it's all about play and fun and really a lot of growing.
Yeah, because children do need to feel safe. They do need to believe that someone will take care of them if they get into trouble, right? And so when that safety is there, and it can be large, I know that when I was growing up, and this was a long time ago, um, you know, we were allowed to wander all over our community. But the people, everybody, all that we a lot of stay-at-home mothers at that time, they were all watching out for us. I remember one time I crossed the wrong road. Boy, did I get into trouble because somebody told my mother that I was doing something unsafe. And so we need to, you know, but once children feel safe, then they're ready to go. Now, what is play? Play is not work. People say, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. But we have to be so careful because we have to distinguish that when children are playing, what is their focus? It's what they're doing. It's watching that caterpillar. Okay, that's the activity. The activity is watching the caterpillar. The engagement is making that snowman. The fun is playing with the snow and seeing what it does. And we have to be very careful because, and this is a big mistake that I made when I, you know, because I love teaching things to people, is to be so careful because it's not a bad thing, for example, if the child is looking at the caterpillar, to tell them a little bit about the caterpillar. But if we then, after that, make them draw pictures of the caterpillar and so on, and make it about the outcome, then we make the play into work. And again, it's very possible in a classroom setting we can do both, but we have to just be careful because sometimes we think things are fun, but they're actually what happened.
But now it's better.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what I did. Okay, so play is not work and it's not for real. And obviously, if a child hurts another child during play, there have to be consequences. But what we mean to say here is children can do pretend fighting, they can pretend to die, they can pretend to be sick, and they can get up again, right? So they're going to play things, and we're going to look at it a bit later, but it's not going to be for real. And of course, it's expressive and exploratory, and there's just so much energy when children are just doing what comes from their heart. Play is like that bubble. It's a bubble around a very special experience where there is engagement. They really want to do it, where they feel very safe, and in that safety are able to be free. And then the growth happens. Now, we want to make sure that we create conditions for play. And so how do we do that? And especially with young children, they need to feel connection. Those of you that work with little ones, especially in daycare and in K4, you know they very often will look to you and just want a little hug from you. And I don't know if you can give it to them now. They want a reassurance that you're there. Very much your job often when the playtime is that you just walk around and the kids know you're there. And so that is what they need. Just like this little girl probably just came, got a hug from her dad, poof, went back to play. And some of our children, of course, need the reassurance with their own parents. You know, is my mommy and daddy thinking of me? And so sometimes it's important to make sure that we have photos or articles of clothing, especially for a child who's feeling a little bit insecure about their parent having left. They just have that little visual connection, that connection through the sense of smell. It makes them feel safe, and then they can go back and play. We need to make sure that we provide time for playing alone because little children have their own ideas and they're not always very good about cooperating. As you know, a lot of them do parallel play. And items that are not too specific. Who knows what this stick is for this little boy? He makes it whatever he wants to make it, right? And that's what we want, are things that kids can make into what they want. And again, that's why digital devices aren't so good because they're too specific, just whatever. And that's why outdoor play is so incredibly important. We do need to make sure there's structure. So sometimes everybody wants to play in the kitchen area and that doesn't work very well. So we limit the number of children and we assign playstations. That's our job as adults, to keep them all safe. But once they're there, then they do whatever they want to do. And we need to create some signals for the beginning of playtime, the end of playtime. That's the one. And so we need to also make sure that play should be the priority. If you have to cancel something, don't cancel playtime, not for our little ones. And then, of course, be careful not to turn play into work with praise or rewards, because it's really play is about what they want to do. It's about their agenda. And when we praise it, it's because then they start to think, well, I have to do what the teacher wants me to do. There are many times when they have to do what we want them to do, but when it's playtime, we want to be careful about that. We talked last time about the three big processes in development. And so just very quickly, the emergent process where the self is truly expressed. This is about the child, their own desires, their want-tos, their curiosity, their intentions, their initiatives, their aspirations, their expression, their personal meaning. Those little children that were looking at the caterpillar, there were two children looking at it. Other children weren't interested. They didn't have to look at it, just the ones who wanted to, right? It's about creativity and about discovery and about exploration. And so this little girl, she's figuring out what to do with those blocks, and these other little girls are figuring out. I think they're putting makeup on. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, it's what they want to do. So this is when the child creates a sense of who or he or she is. In that integrative process during play, oh my goodness, there's lots of conflict, inner conflict that arises. You figure things out, you make mistakes, you notice, oh, similarities and differences, you use trial and error, and of course you learn to get along with others in play. Again, it's about discovery and about dissonance and about exploring. These boys, it looks to me, I could just see their brain cells working. Like there's something going on here. Is that right? Is that the way it's supposed to be? Is that dangerous? Who knows what they're thinking? But their brain is working on it. And here, these kids, they're all reading the same book, but look at different ones are looking at different pictures. And what they're learning here, naturally, intuitively, is different people notice different things at different times, right? And so that process, on the one hand, on the other hand, there's different ways of looking at the world happen naturally through play. And so it's a leap from purity and impulsiveness into a world of inner conflict where things are a bit different. And then the adaptive process, well, playing with separation and lack or loss. And it's very important. And for some of our children, if they've had a lot of loss in their life, if people have gone away, if people have died sadly, if things haven't worked out in their life, then they have to, in their play with those difficult emotions that they've had. They imagine the unimaginable. They feel their sadness one step removed, and then they're able to have that adaptive process, but through the plaything. So yes, they feel their sadness. They very often, people have said to me, I know this child, she keeps playing, that her mother has lost her and her mother's never coming back. Well, she's playing it and she can feel her sadness because it's not for real in that moment. And they explore with being sick. I think a lot of our children probably are playing hospital, and recovery, when they've gone through that, then they can bounce back. And so it's a leap from weakness and fragility into strength and resilience. And there are many other types of play. What's so fascinating to me here is that, we think hide and seek and tag is just a random game. No, it's about attachment. Are you going to catch me? Right? Pretending to be. It's amazing if you watch who children are pretending to be. They're pretending to be like their grandma. They're pretending to be like their grandpa. They're pretending to be like their big brother. I know Dr. Neufeld, because this is Dr. Neufeld's work here, he talked about his grandson who loved his uncle and was wearing cowboy boots like to bed because his uncle wore cowboy boots, right? It was so important to him. Even when you're collecting things, it's about the attachment need. And of course, facing separation through disaster, playing that to say no. Oh my goodness, children aren't allowed to say no, but in play you can say no and not get into so much trouble. Alpha play, oh my goodness, playing with baby dolls, taking care of little animals, teaching the hero, being the parent. This all prepares a child for becoming a parent. We have natural caretaking instincts inside of us. And when there's enough time to do this, it happens. And then there's the other side of it. There's playing, letting somebody take care of you. So I don't know. I'm going to just stop here and just see if Sarah or Lynn, if you want to add anything to some of this, what I've said so far about play.
Well, I can go right now or at the end, just like you want, Eva, or maybe let Lynn jump in.
Well, when you were given the statistics about, the hours of loss of play, which was 8 hours a week, for unstructured play for children, and that, it's causing a lot of, the anxiety, the depression, the ADHD, and, whether people are making a connection to that or not, it amazed me. And so when some of the students get referred to me, whether it's through a psychologist's assessment or a parent, it's mainly around that. And I look at some of the children that it's a lot of structured in their life. They don't have too much of this free time. So it's like they're always rushing, it seems, to get from school, and then they, have to go to the homework club or the library, or they're going to karate or judo. It just goes on and on. And I remember asking this little girl, I said, well, when do you have time to play? So there's not too much time there, and then it turns out there's like even the fear of outdoors.
Yeah.
And in our culture, when you're talking about the right brain, I mean, we're right brain people.
Yes.
And we love play from our
Yes.
first breath, we're learning to our last breath, we're learning. And, whether we're physically playing or not, as adults, we're laughing.
Yes.
A lot of
Yes.
humor, and there is play, there's teasing, and there, little practical jokes. But,
Exactly.
but it's just, now when we're looking at children, it's a punishment now to have to send them outside. They don't want to go out. When we were growing up, it was a punishment when you had to stay in the house.
Yeah.
And now things have changed, it's just amazing. And, we need to be on the earth.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
how we ground. That's how we root ourselves. That's how we get our values, and our connection to the earth and seasons, using our senses. It's like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Things
No,
have changed.
you're absolutely right. And yes, and unfortunately, there's a lot of studies about a left brain world and a right brained world, and the right brain world is a much healthier world, but we've drifted over to being that logical, and it's not helping us at all. So, yeah, one of the reasons why I'm so motivated to share this knowledge about play, and you're going to see as we go through it, all the different ways of playing it. We think children playing with toys, but it's way more than that. Yeah, so. Yeah, so let me just go through here, and then we'll get some more comments at the end. But thank you, Lynn, appreciate that. The other reason, of course, why children have to play, it's really about psychological health and emotional well-being, because we have emotions that need to be worked through. When something happens to us, we're supposed to, especially children, but even for adults, we need to let those emotions go through. Of course, when an emotion happens, it can be a bit of a problem if it's not expressed appropriately. And I know that some of the children that you deal with, their emotions are very, very messy. If what we need to remember is that there are three big emotions that we face as human beings. When especially when things are not working well in our world and when we're facing separation, and they're very intense, and they're often felt one at a time. We have a huge desire to want to please people. That's the pursuit. We also have alarm when we get really afraid, and then we have frustration when things aren't working for us, and they're usually very, very intense. And so sometimes my daughter, for example, was a child who really wanted to please other people. She was so good at school, and she was so afraid of having people be upset with her. But oh my goodness, when she got home, because she had her learning disabilities, she had so much frustration in her, and it needed to come out somewhere. So one of the things we're going to look at is how can play help these emotions come through, because when they're stirred up, their play really reflects the themes that they're struggling with, and it's how they can make sense of their emotions. And drawing pictures, and Sarah's going to share some of the examples that she's had with some children, also herself, is that these emotions have to come out somewhere, and in play they can come out in a safe way. So how do kids play out emotions? And again, this is something that Dr. Neufeld in his work alerted me to, and I didn't realize, oh my goodness. So alarm at play. Okay, so how do children play out alarm? Well, they do it through things that are really quite normal, but we don't even realize it actually has an emotional part to it as well. And so play is like a release valve. I think of of being in schools, and when recess time comes, and I know, Lynn, some of the kids don't want to go out at recess, but luckily some of them still do, right? And the door opens, and all of a sudden you see these kids running and jumping and screaming and yelling. Well, they've been holding it all in the classroom, right? So it's got to come out somewhere. I know at the beginning of the COVID, one of the women said, "My goodness, my son's been playing coronavirus tag. What's wrong with him?" Well, that's what they had on their mind, and they play with monsters and they play being the monster, and then they want scary stories, because it's one step removed from the scary stuff that they're having, and they like pretending to be scared, and they like playing disaster, and they like playing hospital and being sick. I love this picture of this little girl. She's playing with the alarm that's inside of her, and she's taming that alarm by being alarming, but not in a way that wants to hurt anybody, but just the alarm is coming out. You can do the same thing with separation. I remember one woman who had adopted a child, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle around the adoption, and so there was a back and forth, and the little girl had to go back to her family, and then came back to this woman who was adopting her. And she said, This little girl," she said, "every day, Eva, every day, she played with her dolls. Somebody taking the doll away from the mummy." Every day, she said, "How long is this going to go on?" I said, "As long as the little girl needs to do it." Because that was the story of her life, but it was too scary to talk about it, but she had to play it out. And so about 3 weeks later, she said, "Okay, my daughter is playing it less now, because now in the play, I'm noticing that somebody's coming and taking care of her." Yes, because you took care of your daughter, but she couldn't tell you how scared she was you wouldn't come back, but because she could play it through. Even hide and seek is about, are they going to find me? And then lots children, Grimm's fairy tales where kids are lost or separated. Why do children like those fairy tales? Because in the story, they're lost, but they're found, right? And so here's a little kid playing hide and seek. Hopefully somebody will find this little kid, but they're playing with that little bit of separation. One of my other colleagues who some of the suggestions we have here came from her. It's through play that children get to imagine how they will survive in the face of adversity, right? They imagine these things and then they can get through them. Now, frustration, that's a really interesting one, because frustration has two parts to it. We usually see the other part, which is the attack part. When things aren't working for us, remember, I mean, those of you that are parents, you're frustrated with your children, you're frustrated with your spouse. You say some choice words that are maybe not so nice for them to hear. But there's two parts to frustration, because the energy of frustration first is about trying to make it work. When we get frustrated, we say to the other person, "Listen to me." And we're trying to make them listen to us so things will work. And so the first energy of frustration is making things work. Well, what's so fascinating is that a frustrated child actually can get a lot of emotional solace through doing puzzles, constructing in crafts, building in robots. Now, again, obviously, if it's if it's not working, then it's a problem. But lots of times, children, and especially we see some of our older children, in Lynn, you've probably seen this. Some of the older kids still like playing with Lego. It's easy for them; they can do it. But why? Because so much isn't working in their lives. That's the thing they can make work. And so this is really important for our children, to give them a chance to make things work. One of the recommendations I'm making for teachers of older children in their classrooms right now, because COVID is so frustrating, is have a puzzle table where they can make that puzzle and feel like they've done something. Maybe even for us as adults, that's helpful. Now, of course, there's the other part, the attacking or the destroying, the feeling that we just want to, do something to somebody. And a lot of our children spontaneously and naturally do play fighting. I have a daughter and a son, and my son and my daughter was older, and she did some of this, but my son and his friends were always fighting and play fighting and play fighting, and we were trying to make them peaceful people. And I didn't realize that, oh my goodness, of course, I'm teaching them to be a peaceful person outside of play, but in play, and we ended up giving them like plastic or pool noodles to play with so they didn't hurt anybody. That natural attacking had to be there. So destroying and demolishing, hitting and throwing, kicking and screaming, war games, attacking games, play fighting are all a healthy way for kids to get it out. Men actually get that better than women. A lot of men that I know will go and play a hockey game when they're really frustrated, because in the hockey game they can let out their frustration without actually hurting somebody. I mean, sometimes there's a little bit too much there, but you know what I mean? Like they that come and go. We don't. I know that I didn't understand that, but it's necessary. And what they have found, actually, they're in schools where they allow children to play fight. It actually reduces the level of frustration and decreases the aggression and the violence in real life. One of the things we're doing with a lot of our kids is we're saying, don't play like that. Don't play like that. I work with a school with children with very, very severe behavior problems. And I have encouraged, especially the young men who work there, to get pool noodles and to have fun with the kids play fighting. Have fun. And they thought, oh, this isn't going to work. This is going to make the kids more aggressive. It was the opposite because it was in fun. It was in fun. And they could hit without hurting. So play offers a workspace for development, a protection for feelings, and expression without repercussion. Things won't happen. You're allowed to do it here, and it's okay. And of course, they did have to teach the kids how to do it so it didn't hurt. And so what we want to do is help our children to find their play. And there are many different ways of playing. This little girl's playing with her face. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, good for her. She might not have any toys to play with, but she can play with her face. And so we have playing with movement, the playing with your voice. I don't have grandchildren and I can hardly wait because I love reading to grandchildren with all the funny voices, right? The Mr. Mouse speaks in a creaky voice, and Mr. Bear speaks in a big voice, and all those things that are so much fun. Obviously, playing with art and music, playing with identities, putting on that hat, becoming that other person, playing with your imagination, playing with words and meaning with older children. That's what teasing is all about, right? Teasing and calling and just kind of finding something fun way, and then obviously playing with emotions and playing with ideas. This is what the older children will do. These are all fun ways of playing. We can have spontaneous play or organized play. We can organize play for our children. We can have object play or imaginary play, solitary play, social play, rough and tumble play where it looks like we're trying to hurt somebody, and cooperative play. As long as it's within that bubble, as long as it's not for real, it actually, all of these are valid ways of playing. And obviously, in terms of the materials, well, we'd love to have toys for our children, but toilet paper rolls, elastics, strings, threads, fabrics. When we were doing this session for homes, for people in homes, we said you don't need to go out and buy a whole lot of stuff. In fact, you can't go out and buy a whole lot of stuff because the stores are all closed. But just get stuff from nature, sticks and pebbles, or Play-Doh or papers and crayons and sheets and towels and curtains, old clothes, shoes, purses, hats. These are all things that children can play with. This is stuff that you can do with popsicle sticks and clothespins, forts that you can make with sheets, right? These are all the ways that we can do it. And it's all different ways that we can play. And of course, outdoor play, my goodness, what a rich, rich world there is outdoor. And I hope that there are people here who are part of forest schools or have done forest schools and can just share with us their experiences about that. Singing, dancing, playing music. These are all ways, it's amazing, just the sound of a drum, the stepping in rhythm, right? When you're doing it for expression can make such a difference. And of course, emotional expression without words. Sarah, I don't know if you want to just talk a little bit about some of the experiences that you've had with some of these things with children.
Yes, I'm like an artist. I observe a lot, and then one day I was with a group of 6, 7 years old, and they were doing their stuff. Some were doing painting, some were doing drawing, and one little boy that I know because he's from my community he had really a tough childhood, and his parent was screaming a lot. The fact that he was screaming when he was speaking, and so I noticed that someone was mixing the black and the red, and I was like, oh my God, who did mix the color like that? And then I turned and he was like painting with his bold hand, black and red, and like a lot of, and then I look at him, and instead of like, wait, you should not do that. Well, I told him, do you want some more? Go, and then encourage him, because I could feel that something so powerful, all his anger and all his frustration was coming out. And in a way, he was kind of leading me a way of being more free in my painting, my own art. So I think we can just look at this, and sometimes we have to take a step back and avoid most of the time giving them already like snowman. You have to draw a snowman, but there's so little space for creativities. Instead of giving them a big a white piece of paper or anything else to paint on it, a box, or and then there's so much space for creativities, and then they can then create their own words, and don't always comment on, oh, it's beautiful or it's not, because they want to please you, they want to do beautiful stuff after. And it's quite freaking that we notice a older boy or girl who said like, I know, and just messed up his drawing and say it's not beautiful. But it's more interesting to say, well, be the art critique, well, what it's represent, and then make them speak about what they create, and they were like, it's interesting and it's intense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah, we and children do become very sensitive. Hannah Beach has, and we're going to we'll share some of these other activities with you. One of them we'll be sharing in a moment. But I know she has, remember, Sarah, you were asking, like, why are people so self-conscious about how they're drawing? Well, I mean, I know I'm very self-conscious. My sister is a wonderful artist. Well, I can't be like her. But when I took art class and I didn't have a choice, I had to get out what worked for me. And so sometimes we just have to give space to children. In fact, this little girl, it looks just like she's scribbling, but one of Hannah's exercises, that's an emotional exercise, is just to get kids to scribble and scribble, and then she plays it with music, and you scribble fast and you scribble slow, and you just get it out. And actually, probably what would happen next is, if then you gave children another piece of paper, then probably they, after they've gotten this frustration out, they've gotten some of this emotional, energy out, the alarm out, they would probably then start to draw something that made sense for them. It would become a picture that they wanted to draw. And again, I like what you're saying here, Sarah, is rather than saying, oh, what a nice house, just, oh, I see you put so much emotion into that. Oh, you chose your colors so carefully, right? They make sense to you. So just appreciate what the child is doing, so that no child feels that what they do is better or worse than another child, because that's when we stop drawing, is when we think we're not good enough, right? Yeah. 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 This is another one, just other things that we can do if you want to get frustration out, you know uh, write it down. For older kids, you can write it down and throw them around. uh, and I often explain to teachers, especially now with the whole COVID thing, the teachers are frustrated, the students are frustrated. We can't do things the way we want to. We have to be so careful all the time. I think once a day you need to have a frustration party, or a dance party, or a big table where you can get it out, or a mural where you can paint it out. Or if you really need to, like, get some bubble wrap and stomp on the bubble wrap. And actually, I think the adults need this as much as the kids do. Or crush egg cartons, or use spray bottles and paint. Pool noodle sword fighting, a drumming party. These are all things of getting out that overload of frustration that's in our system. And of course, that comes with adrenaline and cortisol that need to kind of get out. And these are all fun ways that we can guide children in helping them get that out. Her frustration monster one is, think of a time when you felt really frustrated and imagine that your frustration was a monster, right? And draw that monster. Is it big? What color is it? And it doesn't matter what it looks like. It can be whatever it looks like. We actually did, a group of adults did this. And they said after they did it, they just felt so much better. They could get the stuff out. And one of the things we're encouraging, because I work with the English School Boards of Quebec, one thing we're encouraging is every day do something like this with your children. Give them that space to express their emotions so that it can come out. And again, find other ways like dancing, singing, slow, fast, miming and dress up. being scared. One teacher, I just loved her. She every day, and the kids would beg her to play Monster with them. And I said, "Well, what's that game?" "Oh, well, Eva, here it is." And then she had a couple of kids where she said to them, "Now put on your earphones because I'm going to yell really loud." And so the kids put on their little earphones because some of them are sensitive to noise, but they all wanted to play it with her. And she pretended to be the big monster and they all ran away. But of course, she was a very sensitive teacher, so she knew how scary she could be. But they loved to be scared. They just loved it, right? And the other one is like being a superhero. I'm big. I can handle anything. So again, play can be guided by an adult as well, as long as it's all about the fun. And of course, stories and all sorts of stories about emotion. And so telling stories. And I am my husband is in the month of December, he has a career. He's Santa Claus. But this year he had to be Santa Claus on Zoom. And I'm not there usually when he does the Santa thing, but this time because he's not very good at technology, I had to be his technology person. So I was Mrs. Santa. Anyway, I'll show you a picture of that one day. It was quite funny. Um, and he was in his old, when he did Santa in live with children, he would read them stories. And then he tried to do that on Zoom with a little 3-year-old. And after about 3 pages, the poor little 3-year-old lost interest in the story. And so it didn't work out all that well, but it was fine. My husband is a very caring Santa, so the little boy felt okay. But you know what I realized? I thought, oh my goodness, this child didn't want to see a book. What he wanted to hear was Santa's voice. And that's why telling stories is so much better than even reading a story to a child, although reading is wonderful too. But just tell stories. And of course, in your cultures, you all have a storytelling culture. And it's just about, and there's stories and messages you can talk about what a child did wrong in the context of the story. So no child feels like anyone's pointing a finger at them, but you give the message, right? So it's really important. And read stories about emotions, but actually my thing is tell the story with the pictures, right? If you're not good at imagining a story, well, lots of people have written beautiful stories, and I've shared some here. And there's a website where you can go and find these books, but also I have a list that I can send to you. And so there's lots of books that you can use to inspire you to tell these emotional stories with children. Finally, the last thing I want to say is just play with them, have fun with them, be there for them. Playing with children increases attachment. When our eyes are smiling, when the kids are when our heads are nodding, children want to be with us and they're much more willing to listen to us. And when we have this mutual joy, the stress response goes down. And especially for our little ones, playtime should never be earned. It should be scheduled and protected. And in fact, the more the child is in trouble, the more they need their playtime. At that school where we had these very, very challenging children, we made sure that every one of them had participated in the Friday afternoon playtime, but we often gave them playtime on Wednesdays as well. The more trouble they were in, the more they needed to play. And then finally, when all else fails, and again, I appreciate for some of you, you've got a whole bunch of these little 3 and 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds running around and they're causing all sorts of trouble. Well, if you can train yourself to realize when things are getting out of control, you can actually make it fun or a game. And boy, that's not an easy thing to do, to get their attention. And many of you do this spontaneously. You start singing, time to clean up, or you start doing a dance or you use a funny voice. And all of a sudden you wave your hands and the kids will start looking at you, because if they look at you and you're smiling, they want to be part of that too. And once they're laughing and smiling, then you can bring them down. We need to clean up now, right? And away we go. So much more can be done when we make it fun for our children. Sarah, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this beautiful, beautiful picture.
Yes, those are my friends. They were at my cabin at the time, and then a moment just before that, they were sitting and chatting in the bush around the mushrooms and inventing story about they were sitting in the Smurf village, and I was just listening to them, and then I was amazed what came out of their head, and they were just, there. And then we find this caterpillar, and then they were just amazed by this, and then questioning. So by going into the outdoor, you don't have to bring so many toys and think, well, the nature will do the job for you. And so many opportunities to learn and to play will come. So you don't even have to prepare that much. Seems like you can slide, you can, and discover at the same times. So my message for you was to really be courageous and try to play. Put yourself in danger, put your pride on the side, and then just try something. Try to remember when you were a kid yourself, what you like to do, what make you laugh, and things like that. I have a fact that one day I was in the community, and Valérie have to had a meeting with the two teacher. So they left me with the whole class, that the kids that they don't know me really well. They just saw me for a day. So I was like, oh my God, that's my game plan was to play. So I just sit in the middle of the class and start pretending I was a monkey. I do an imitation of a monkey very well. I won't do right now, but I'm super good at it. So, and then they all look at me like I'm a crazy person and start to playing animals, and they want me to find out what kind of animals. Of course, you can find really fast, but you just like, no, no, no. And then you want them to go in deeper and deeper, and the shire, like, they start to come in. So it took me about 15 seconds to get their attention, and in a minute or two, everybody was like going crazy and been super creative into this play game. So you don't have to think a lot ahead. You just have to let it go, and don't be afraid to try new things, and see what happened with this. So the outdoors really very a place where you can connect, and so powerful way of healing to our emotion to in the nature too. So you can scream, you won't bug anybody, and also by dancing. I just want to tell you a little bit about dancing. Dancing, it's a way where you can really express yourself. So the kids love to dance. So if you feel like it's not a good day for them, if they're, this energy, well, put some music on, let this, energy out. There's no harm in dancing. You can release so much in those art activities. So it's my message for you. So be courageous and play.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You said it so beautifully. Yes, I mean, again, we say, well, if I'm supposed to be teaching the children a lesson and they're not listening, and I start playing with them, aren't I stopping their learning? Well, actually, no, because as I say, the play grows the brain. When they're dancing, when they're getting that out, it's making them feel better. If afterwards you settle them down for 2 minutes, they probably will focus more than if you had done what we all want to do, which is make them try to get them to behave. Just take the chance. And I had one teacher who did that every time. She just went with the children. Yes, she only had a few minutes for the formal kind of teaching, but I truly believe that when the children were feeling good about themselves, when they were feeling connected to the teacher, they learned more in that 2 minutes or 3 minutes than if she had made them work for 20 minutes, but they didn't get anything out of it. So the brain develops when we dance, when we do, when we play. The emotional well-being and attachment. These are all things that are happening, and so we really shouldn't begrudge playtime. In Finland, children are allowed to play until they're 8 years old, and they are some of the best readers and writers by the time they're 10. So we just have to be very, very careful that we don't lose this deep intuition that we have around playtime. So this was what we want you to do for next week. If you're able to join us at our time to share, as Sarah says, be courageous, because we need to play as adults too. Go outside in nature and remember when you were playing as a child. How does it feel? And observe children playing. What did you notice? Did you see them playing alarm? Did you see them playing frustration? Did you see them do all these kinds of things that we talked about? And I'm so sorry, I had meant to do this. I had prepared it. I will put up our slides. I think there's a way of doing it where we can put it up either here or I don't know where will we put the slides, Valerie, so people can find it?
To share, I will share the PowerPoint with our participant. I just send them the a form so they can, by the survey, I will have their email address and send them to them specially, because
Okay.
I like to connect with each of you. So so if you can fill in the form, then I will send you the PowerPoint, and it's in the chat box. It's really easy. There's only 5 questions, so please fill the form. And then if I think you're done with your presentation.
Yes, that was the presentation.
So we have time for a question, but before we go to our question, Lynn, do you have something? I would give you a 5 minutes if you want to talk on what's been said, and other participant, you can ask your question in the chat box. So just prepare your question or comments, because it's what really help us. So now to you.
So, okay, so I'll just say, you know, the importance of play, which was the topic and expression. The room that I work in, I work mainly with from grade 1 to grade 6. I don't really work with the nursery and kindergarten group. But what I hear a lot from the grade 1s, if they get referred to my room, is that they don't want to be in grade 1. They want to go back to kindergarten because it was more fun. You know, there was more play and there was more opportunity for them to, you know, express and themselves and be creative. And once they get to grade 1, you know, unfortunately, and it's, you know, I guess it's just the system that we're in. It's a lot more of, you know, the workbooks and the lessons and learning to write and the letters and phonics and all of that stuff. But, you know, I think it's important that, you know, it says like, you know, just include some play within the day. And it gives their mind a break too, because it's a big transition from preschool to grade 1. And, you know, and their behavior expresses, it lets us know, you know, if they're upset and they're having a tantrum and they're not paying attention and, you know, they're crying or they just keep wanting to go to the bathroom, you know, that's an indication of, you know, they need time for that. I also want to share a little story about when they're taking their frustration out in play. So in the yoga program, and this was a few years back, a little boy was referred to me from kindergarten. And what happened was he was one of the boys that the frustration of being taken from the mom, and he was put in the father's care, and the mother had no connection with him. He was destroying the classroom or trashing the classroom, throwing things around, chairs, desks, and, you know, it was a hard time for him. So they sent me a referral to see if I could start working with him. And I started, you know, first it was he had to get to know me. And then I'm just going to get to the part where in the room where I was doing yoga, there was a table in there. So I was teaching him a dinosaur walk. So, you know, we're just like acting like dinosaurs. And then he developed this game. He said, under the table, he says, this is the cave, the dinosaur cave, and I'm going to go in the cave, he said, and I'm the baby dinosaur and you're the mommy dinosaur, and you're looking for your baby dinosaur. And so I said, okay, this is what he needs. So I started and I kept, you know, I would say, all right, where's my baby dinosaur? I miss my baby. I love my baby. And at one point now he crawls from under the table and I would have to pick him up. Every time I worked with this boy 3 days out of the week, and every day we had to play this game, and I would have to pick him up and he would put his head on my shoulder and you could just feel his whole body just relax. because this is what he needed. So that was, an example of, frustration coming out and the separation of not seeing mom in the yoga program. And so the yoga program that I do has a lot of movement, a lot of dance, a lot of singing. I bring in commercial games, and it doesn't matter what level. I just worked with a girl this morning, grade 6, and we're playing games, sand, the little sandbag, tossing it. And when we get a certain number, she has to, well, on the side, she picks a yoga card and we do the yoga. But, again, it's movement. It's, a lot of things that, students need. It's not just for the little ones. They enjoy play. They enjoy play. So, yeah, and when you talked about art, Sarah, and, releasing some stuff through art, part of the yoga program that I get to them do sometimes is they have to draw a picture. I put the music on and they draw a picture using their toes. So the paper is on the wall and, they're lying on their backs and they just pick what colors. And it's just, using that part of their body and the part of the brain, that's going to control that type of movement. And it's just amazing what they come up with, and they love it. They love it. So I just wanted to share that part of, the importance of play. And, I know it goes from 4 to age 8. And it's important that even in grade 1 and 2, that there's still, play, a lot of play included in, because it's a method to learning. It doesn't always have to be there. There could be fun, creative ways to teach. So that's it.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a lovely story about the baby dinosaur. Yeah. If there aren't questions, I don't see any questions here. Valerie, are you seeing questions?
No, there were no questions. I had 2 persons filling the little survey saying that it was delightful and relevant to what we're trying to focus on here, on play. Some people are saying that they love to work outdoors with the children because they don't see any, let me write it properly, you never see any behaviors and all the children have fun while playing. So,
yeah.
So is there any question? Because you can raise your hand also, and if you don't want to write it, we can, or any comments or story to share before we end our presentation.
I'll try the toe painting this weekend. I'll show you that at the sharing. And maybe my monkey special invitation.
So if there are no questions,
I do have one more story that I wanted Sarah to share because I didn't quite know how to work it in, and I realized I jumped over it. But I think we talked about attacking energy, and I know we're and again we really want to make sure that our children become kind, caring, gentle people, right? But I think we need to understand that when a child can let it out, it actually does help. So Sarah, do you want to tell the story about that little boy you saw in the forest kindergarten?
First time I'm in observation of the forest kindergarten in Les Gauche, and it's a perfect example of where frustration will lead to problem solving. So this little boy, first 20 minutes, I'm just there and watching, and this little boy, we're fiddle picking, so supposed to, but the children are free to do whatever they want. So I'm just like, okay, we're not picking. But so this little boy just eating the trees, and for 20 minutes had this energy, not playing, just attacking everything on the ground, but not eating on no friend. He was just letting in, and I'm just like, okay, he's bugging me a lot. I'm watching the teacher. Are they gonna tell him not to do that? But no, they didn't. After 20 minutes, what happened? He calmed down and tried start playing. and find that he was problem solving, that all the bucket was on the floor. So he kind of invent like something with sticks, and then arrange all the buckets and fill the bucket of his friends so they can all have some to bring home. I was just amazed to see the progression, and all the energy of attacking came to problem solving and helping have been the most remarkable, after leading to something so creative and inventive. I was just shocked that he need that 20 minutes to let it all out. And if he was in the classroom, there'd probably a lot of attention going around him, and tantrum, and like, so you just need that time. And nature it's where I can observe that nature was taking care of him. It was not an adult, hey, calm down or scream, but just naturally, motherhood did the job.
Yeah. Well, and yes, because he wasn't destroying things, right? I mean, it was trees and leaves and so on, and yeah, we need to provide that safe space for some of that. I mean, can you imagine? I'm sure some of you know, some of these children. I mean, just being separated from the mother, being having to sleep in a different house every night. So many things that aren't working in a child's life, that they can't even tell us, but they still need to get it out. And what a lovely gift those adults gave to that little boy, and they probably, thank goodness, knew that it would happen. They just had the patience to let it come out. And then his beautiful mind took over. And so instead of being a child in trouble, he became a contributor. And we have to have faith in that process.
And they also carry those little medicine pouch of tobacco, so they teach really the value too. So they kind of, they have their consciousness. If they heard something from nature, well, they give an offering. So, and then you can really hear the students like taking this with all their full heart, like, oh, you just heard this little ant, and then you won't find her mommy back, and so
Yeah.
and then giving tobacco, so very instinctively. So it's not something that you can really teach on a poster or on the wall. You teach by example and by action experience like this. So I think it's very strong program.
Well, we all have natural caring instincts inside of us. I mean, just watch any child with a little baby puppy or whatever, they want to take care of it. But sometimes we also have big other emotions inside of us that need a safe place to come out. Most of us as adults, I always joke about the fact on my really frustrating days, you don't want to be in the parking lot with me because I'm going to slam my car door a couple of times, but when there's nobody around, so I don't offend anybody, but oh, I need to get it out. Where do our children have a chance to get it out, right? And so sometimes in nature they can. And again, he obviously repaired, because after he maybe kind of broke things a bit, he also built something, and that's called reparation, right? So we have to have patience with it. And I'm sure if he was only 4 or 5 years old, it's going to be a lot. He does have a little more time to grow up and become more respectful. Yeah.
Eva, we have
Yeah.
a question here, but before you answer that question, I just want to say that we will send you the handout, and if you want to pass it on to colleagues and parents, because that's one of the comments, the recording of the workshop will be on FNEC YouTube playlist, so you can also share the workshop. And then if you have any question, do not hesitate. You can always write to me, Valérie Fortin, at the FNEC, and then we're there to answer your questions. So Eva, the question somebody asked is, what would you say to teacher that see play as a reward and does not like it when kids are not punished for their inappropriate behavior?
Well, I've been in education for many, many years, and I really, really respect teachers a lot. But I have learned the hard way that there are some people whom you can't convince to do otherwise. So I don't know. I mean, some people are still think that if you're kind to a child who's been inappropriate, that they will keep doing the inappropriate behavior. The only thing I can say is that the punishment shouldn't be around losing playtime. You know, playtime is the right of a child. It's not something they earn. So yes, if you need to do something else for that child, and I know play is the simplest thing to take away from a child, but you know, I also if we just start as a school, as a way of being, of trying to honor play, maybe that person will be less likely to want to do it. The only other thing I can say, and I know this is not everyone wants to hear this, but you know, if I've had a really bad day at work and I come home and I complain to my husband that I had a really bad day and that people were being really inappropriate and why were they being so, you know, unthinking, and I go on and on and on and complain about all my, you know, everybody in the world who was not acting the way they should, you know, and if my husband, you know, said to me, well, honey, what did you do? I wouldn't be very happy about it. I want you to listen to me. And also recognize that if he gives me, you know, if he makes me a cup of tea when I've been grumping and complaining, and of course in the morning he saw me in my bad mood and he knows, oh boy, she's going to have a bad day when she's in that kind of a mood. So he, you know, but if he makes me a cup of tea, he's not reinforcing my bad behaviors. Probably what will happen is I'll take my cup of tea and his kindness will remind me that maybe there's more to this picture. And by the end of the cup of tea, I bet I'm saying, oh my goodness, honey, was I in a bad mood this morning? Yes, dear, you were. Oh my goodness, I've got all sorts of people to apologize to. Kindness begets kindness. A child who has behaved inappropriately, we have to sometimes not let them play with other children because they might be want to hurt other children, but if we at least give them a place to play somewhere else. We're going to be talking about this in some of our other sessions, how we as adults manage a child's world so they don't hurt other people, but also give them what it is that they need. A little child who hurts another child usually has something going on inside of them, you know, just like that little one who was missing his mom. You know, so it's a different way of looking, and we will look at how we can keep the other children safe, but the behavior comes from growing up, not from being rewarded or punished. You know, and that's the big message we're giving here, is behavior comes from growing up.
Thank you, Eva. We got a last question, I guess. Where do trays align between time to work and time to play in class? Example, we have a kid in grade 3 that always wants to play, but we need him to do some academic work too, and we want to be careful not giving him too much more play time than other kids.
Ah, okay, so there's two parts to this question. Yes, he's probably behind in his academics, and therefore he does need to do more work, but there's probably a reason why he's behind. And so yes, we need to sometimes be very, very strategic about what we want this child to do. I know that some of the children that I worked with, I would say to the teacher, pick 3 things you want him to do, not 10 things. He can't do 10 things, but are there 3 key things that if he can do those, you know that he's getting the idea. And then the other part of the question was, sorry, just remind me what it was.
Yes, sorry. Example, we have a kid in grade 3 that always wants to play, but we need him to do some academic work too, and we want to be careful not giving him too much more play time than
And then the other
kids.
children. So sometimes, yes, because the other children are going to say, well, why does he get to play and we don't get to play? Absolutely. That's why a room like Lynn's is just wonderful, because when he needs to go play, sometimes he has to go play somewhere else, right? But you know, so many of these children, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about childhood experiences that can be somewhat traumatic for a child. When you are living in a very challenging home situation, you don't feel safe. And so you actually didn't play. He might be in grade 3, but he probably has the play needs of a 4-year-old because he didn't have the safety in his home to be able to do all the playing he needed. So we have to compensate for that later. So sometimes we need to find, oh, you've got to go see Miss Jacobs, right? But Miss Jacobs gives him what he needs in your room. So he might need some special time with you so that he can get that playing out.
Thank you, Eva. So we got maybe time for one last question. otherwise, we're hoping to see you on our sharing time to share next week. It will be on Zoom, so we see faces. We really enjoyed our experience of last week. We had one in English, one in French, and we learned from you. It was delightful to be there, I guess, and we all learned together, and participants really share good stories and questions for us. So it was a really good time. And then maybe we will come back on the homework that Sarah gave you to go to play, find time to play. What was art in play? Because sometimes as adults, we were so used to be in the routine that play is something hard to do because we always want an outcome. We work a lot, there's always outcome. So when comes times to play, it can be hard also. It can be quite a challenge.
Yes, I think it's important for us as adults to play as well.
So I guess this is the end of our session 2. I would like to say thank you, Eva, Sarah, and Lynn. So have a good night. Good evening.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, have a good evening. See you next week. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.